So we map these regions. These are aggregate networks, and you notice they're sorted by, on the upper left-hand corner, the most populous region, Boston, to the least populous region in the lower right-hand corner, Austin. And if you were to expect them to vary by population, simply, you'd expect to have the most dense network in the upper left-hand corner and the least dense network in the right-hand corner. But what you observe instead is a lot of variation. The third most populous region, Phoenix, is one of the weakest entrepreneurial networks. My friends at Arizona State, who I've worked with, as a matter of fact, Michael Crow, the chancellor of Arizona State, saw that network and he said, how many people are up there, Zoller? And I said, no, there's about 120 people up there, Chancellor. And he said, I'll just have them over to the house and we'll find out what's going on. I thought that was kind of funny. And I bet he'll do that too. One of those kind of guys. But you know, these are the aggregate networks, and like I said, the correlation wasn't as strong. It did suggest that there was a relationship between that and performance, but when you scrape that same network now for deal makers, let's take those same networks and just filter out the one deal people and the two deal people, look at the people who are doing 3 or more, look what happens. Same regions. In this particular case, Silicon Valley, the second most, you would easily need, where are we? We'd need the Caps football stadium, probably. You would probably have to have the Redskins, right? Redskins are here. The football stadium to have all of the deal makers in Silicon Valley in one place. You'd easily need the basketball stadium here in town to keep the folks in Boston, whereas the folks in Phoenix would probably sit in this room. Right? When you look at 4+ connections, 4 or more concurrent equity positions, you probably get the folks in Phoenix in half this room or a quarter of this room. But you'd still need in Silicon Valley a very large, and I don't mean to pick on Phoenix, by the way. There are so many promising opportunities. It was these 2 particular sectors. So, and this is one other parlor trick we do called a component analysis and network analysis. And what we're looking at is the amount of dispersion. And what we're finding is that, as a matter of fact, the most interconnected regions also were the most cohesive regions. So there's also a suggestion that cohesiveness suggests greater performance. I did this for my home state of North Carolina, and we just mapped quickly the Research Triangle Park region and then North Carolina's state. And this is a colorful graphic that shows kind of the concentration you'd expect in the case of North Carolina, more of a high-tech orientation because of the investments that were made in the 1950s in developing Research Triangle Park. And sure enough, very high dominance, the colors of red meaning healthcare, blue being IT, green being industrials. The diversity of industries involved. The aggregate networks are correlated around the major metropolitan areas. The cluster on the middle part of the graphic is Research Triangle Park. The next largest cluster is Charlotte. You notice the colors are a little bit different, much more high-tech in RTP, much more financially driven in Charlotte. But when you look at deal makers, and I'm going to skip a couple of graphics here, the deal makers in that same region are even more tightly correlated to the metropolitan areas. Seems, for those of you who are driving rural development, this has substantial implications. The people who are transacting a lot of financially based, equity-driven investments are in urban areas. That's something that we have to put on the table. I also found, very interestingly enough, that the nature of the people in Charlotte, what would you expect to be in Charlotte? I'm turning into a teacher right now. Right. The folks in RTP, we tend to be deal rich, cash poor. Charlotte's cash rich, deal poor. And we looked at the number of folks who are actually common to those 2 regions. And there were 126 people who had common equity positions, 3 more equity positions in both regions. And I was thinking, boy, if we work together, perhaps we could make this the same economic power as San Diego. And that likely would be the case. What we're finding in the dealmaker networks, and these pretty graphics, we were just talking before, Jason was saying, every network guy has a pretty graphic, right? And there was somebody who had a patent citation to the most incredible network graphic. Where is that guy? Where is his name? Go check out his stuff. It's unbelievable. It's fantastic. It's the best looking network graph I saw. But what these icons mean are the triangles of the entrepreneurs, the circles of the investors, and the squares of the firms. And the larger the icon, the more equity positions they have. I knew I had something. I've been working in Research Triangle Park for about 15 years now. When I actually pulled up this list using secondary data, and it represented the same Rolodex that I had developed over 15 years. And if I were starting a firm, these were likely the 15 key entrepreneurs that I would have gone to visit before I'd actually started. So this is a great way to turn this into competitive intelligence. And for those of you who are actually getting into the business of turning it into a competitive tool this is a great way to identify the actors that make things happen in certain sectors. You get very specific. I'm going to skip a whole bunch of slides right now. And just you can be impressed by the way, I can geolocate. Isn't that nice? I can show you where they live. I can go into really super deal makers and try to understand them. Where it gets interesting is we can start to actually look at their backgrounds. And we looked specifically at a set of things, you can't read these, but I thought for sure there would be people that would be more financially oriented, and their careers would be more financial, or operating people, founders that would do serial startups. What I found, surprisingly, in the case of Research Triangle Park, was there were several profiles they fit. And the profile that was most central for deal makers were people who came through the C-suite, i.e. they came from large companies, and then served as C-level employees of high-growth companies. So it makes me think that we should start to probe the idea of transferring labor from large companies to medium-sized and small companies as a way to encourage things. One last thing I want to show you. I'm going to skip this. This might turn you on for a minute. We looked at affiliations, and the affiliations that we were able to uncover, one was primary, their degree attainment, and we looked specifically at institutional affiliations of those degrees. In every single region we found, these metropolitan regions, there was one local university that was dominant. In Research Triangle Park, which one would it be? Of course you're going to say Chapel Hill. Of course. Those two people have nothing on us, and I know they're NC State people out here. You know, I got your number. Well, let me say that the local universities, in the case of RTP, it is Chapel Hill by a nose. But there are 5 universities in every single region that represent affiliations with deal makers. Can anyone guess what they are? Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, MIT. I'm sorry, 4. And then the pink one's Cornell. Talking tonight to Illinois. Illinois could make a case to be actually very strong in this category. It's probably their association, the way they train people who are involved with investable opportunities. So I'm going to leave it there with some conclusions. And, I honestly believe that in order to encourage economic performance of regions, you can do it very intentionally. I think that we can actually start to explore intentionally building entrepreneurial networks by identifying the leaders that are already out there, because I think they're the gift that keeps on giving. The Blackstone Foundation has made a bet recently in Research Triangle Park, creating the Blackstone Entrepreneurial Network based on this concept. They've just recruited an executive director, and we're going to recruit a number of 20 serial entrepreneurs who will help catalyze the formation of performance networks. So we're going to see if it actually works. It's totally a theory at this point. But hopefully I'll come back in a couple years and say, okay, here's the game plan. Go out and do this in all the regions, and we can actually be competitive again.